All right, as a nursing educator, you know the goal is to create teaching that really sticks, right? Instruction that genuinely improves performance and, most importantly, patient care. Well, today we're going to dive into what I think is the single most critical tool in your toolkit for making that happen: learner analysis.
You know that feeling, right? We've all been there. You pour hours into crafting what feels like the perfect lesson plan, but then crickets. It just doesn't connect. It falls flat. The good news? There's actually a system, a process to keep that from happening, and it's not as complicated as you might think.
Okay, so let's put this in terms every single nurse immediately gets. You would never prescribe a treatment without a diagnosis, would you? Of course not. Well, education works the exact same way. Think of learner analysis as your diagnostic toolkit. You've got to diagnose the educational need before you can prescribe an instruction. It's that simple and that powerful.
So here's how we're going to break this all down today. We've got 4 key phases. We'll start with define, figuring out the problem and the people. Then we'll move to design, how to connect with those learners. After that, demonstrate, gathering your evidence. And we'll wrap up with deliver, seeing this whole thing as a continuous loop. All right, section 1, define. This is all about the problem and the people. You can think of this as the foundation for everything else we're going to do. Seriously, getting this part right is absolutely essential, so let's dive in. Now, this is a really important distinction to make right up front. We've got 2 different things going on here. On one side, you have the needs description. That's all about the problem. What's the gap between what people are doing and what they should be doing, and what's your evidence for that? Then, on the other side, you've got learner characteristics. This is all about the people. What do they already know? What gets them motivated? Or maybe what doesn't? You need both pieces of this puzzle to build something that actually works.
And let's be real, your learners are not just one big generic group. Are you teaching brand new staff nurses? Seasoned advanced practice providers? Maybe it's a mix of doctors, nurses, and therapists on an interprofessional team. You have to get specific, because that one-size-fits-all approach, it usually ends up fitting no one at all. So the fundamental question you have to ask is this: what do they already know? What's their baseline? We need to figure out their prior experience, their existing skills, maybe even some common misconceptions they might have. Because if you skip this step, you're running a huge risk. You could end up boring your experts to tears or totally leaving your beginners in the dust. Okay, on to section 2, design. This is where the rubber meets the road. All that info you just gathered, it's not just for some file sitting on a shelf. It's going to actively shape every single decision we make as we start building our instruction. When it comes to adult learners, especially in healthcare, motivation is, well, it's everything. And you know what drives it? Relevance. They're always thinking, is this going to help me take better care of my patients? So we need to tap into that. We need to understand their confidence levels, maybe their anxieties about a new skill, and what their professional goals are. That's how you get buy-in. And this is the payoff, right here. Your analysis of their motivation isn't just interesting trivia. It directly tells you how to build your course. For example, if you find out your learners are really anxious about a new procedure, then your design needs more support, more practice, more reassurance. If they're a group of busy experts who just want the facts, then you get straight to the point with challenging case studies. See? Their motivation literally dictates your design. Here's another super important distinction we need to make. We're talking about 2 completely different environments. First, there's the learning context, where the actual learning happens. Maybe it's an online module they're trying to squeeze in between shifts. But then you have the application context, and that's the real world, the fast-paced, high-pressure, sometimes chaotic clinical floor where they actually have to use these skills. So what's the takeaway? It's huge. Our job as educators is to bridge that gap between the classroom and the clinic. The closer your instruction gets to real-world conditions, think high-fidelity simulations, realistic case studies, the better the chance that those skills will actually transfer and be used on the job. Okay, section 3, demonstrate. This is the practical part. How do we actually get all this great information about our learners? Well, the most important rule is we don't guess. We gather actual evidence. Let's look at how to do it. So here are your go-to tools. You can do quick interviews. Seriously, a 10-minute chat on the unit can be gold. Simple surveys work great. You can just go and observe people doing their job. And don't forget to look at existing data or talk to managers. The key here is to use a mix of these. Don't just rely on one thing. The more angles you get, the clearer the picture becomes.
And here's the bottom line. Collecting this evidence makes your work so much more credible. It moves you from making assumptions to making data-driven decisions. When a leader asks you, hey, why did you build the training this way? You can point to your evidence instead of just saying, it felt right. That's the difference between being a professional instructional designer and just guessing.
All right, our final section, number 4, deliver. And the big idea here is that learner analysis is not a one-and-done thing you do at the start and then forget about. Not at all. It's a continuous loop that you keep coming back to through every phase of your project.
So while you're actually in the thick of designing and developing your materials, you're constantly asking yourself questions based on that learner profile. Wait, does this case study really work for a new grad? Is this terminology going to go over their heads, or is it too simple? That profile becomes your North Star, your guide for every decision.
Then, when you're actually implementing the training, you're basically a detective. You're watching everything. Are people engaged? Are their questions telling you something? Did you hit an unexpected roadblock you didn't see coming? This is live data collection, and it's where you find out if your initial analysis was on the money. And of course, after it's all over, we evaluate. Did it work? Did we actually see a change in performance? And just as important, were our initial assumptions about our learners correct? All of that data feeds right back into the start of the loop for the next time. And this is so important, because having that rich learner profile is what lets you write sharp, measurable objectives that target the right skills for the right audience, which, by the way, is exactly where we're headed in Module 3.
So when you boil it all down, what's the goal? It's to move from being reactive to being intentional. Instead of scrambling to fix a training that didn't work, we can design with purpose right from the start, because we know we're building it on a solid foundation of evidence. I love this quote because it just nails it. We're always in a rush, right? The pressure is always on to just get it done. But the best, most effective designs come from the people who have the discipline to just stop, take a breath, and ask this one simple, powerful question. Who exactly are my learners?
And this right here is why we do all of this. Because when you integrate real learner analysis into your work, you create something that actually sticks. You're not just checking a box or helping someone pass a quiz. You're creating meaningful, lasting change in how they practice. And that ultimately improves patient care, which is what this is all about.
So I want to leave you with a little challenge. Think about the very next training you need to build. Ask yourself, what's the biggest assumption I'm making about this group of learners? And then, what's one small thing I can do this week to test that assumption and replace it with some real evidence? That right there is your first step.